So welcome everyone to the third episode in our 10-episode Accelerator series, where we're going through parsing of sentences. So we have a 4-step formula where we can take any Arabic sentence, regardless of the length, and be able to properly segment the sentence into its major portions so we can arrive at a precise and accurate translation. So here's the Stories of the Prophets book, little green book, and on the 10th page, the author, he brings a sentence, and I'll read you the sentence, and then we're going to count the number of words. We're going to go from right to left, ignore the wow at the front, and we'll count the number of words and see what we get. Okay, because step number 1 in the parsing formula is to count the number of words. And you might think that is obvious, you just count the number. No, because verbs are sometimes carrying pronouns, and you have to be aware of whether a verb is carrying a pronoun or whether it's empty. And what determines the verb being counted as one word or the verb being counted as 2 words is the presence of a noun following the verb. Okay, because when I say ذهب زيد, Zayd went, the total number of words are 2. We have ذهب and we have زيد, because the principle in Arabic is that every fi'l and every verb must have a fa'il following it, either in the form of a noun or a pronoun, never both. So over here in ذهب زيد, the word Zayd is the subject, and the subjects follow the verbs in Arabic. So ذهب is one word and زيد is the second word. The translation is Zayd went. But if I flip that and I say زيد ذهب, then first of all that's also valid. But the translation is different. It's not the same. Instead of Zayd went, it means Zayd went. In other words, it was Zayd that did the going, and you're putting the emphasis and the focus on Zayd because the audience might be confused about the identity of the person who went. So you're saying that Zayd, he went. Okay, so it's actually 3 words. The number of words are 3 if you say Zaydun dhahaba, because every fi'l must have a fa'il following it, either in the form of a noun or pronoun, never both. So since Zayd is preceding, so that's why it can't be the fa'il. So we're going to relabel it. We're going to say Zayd is the mubtada, and within dhahaba there's a huwa pronoun, so we draw an arrow, and the total number of words would be 3. First it would divide into 1 and 2, mubtada and khabar, and the khabar would then further divide into fi'l and fa'il, where dhahaba would be the fi'l, and the huwa that's being carried within the verb is the fa'il, and then that would complete the sentence. So keeping that in mind. And also, pronouns could be attached and prepositions could be attached. So when pronouns and prepositions are attached, you need to be aware and you have to count each word separately. Like for example, li annaha is not one word. Li annaha. Li, the anna and the ha are 3 separate words. So with that in mind, the sentence is أراد الناس أن يسجدوا للأصنام لأنه يوم عيد. And the people wanted to prostrate to the idols because it was the day of Eid. Because it was the day of Eid. So go ahead, pause the video, count the number of words from Arada until Eid, and then resume the video and see whether you got it right or not. So if you said 12, you would be correct. Okay, now we'll just walk you through it. How is it 12 words? Arada is 1, and Nasu would be 2. And since An-Nas is the subject of Arada, it clearly has the Dhamma on the scene, it clearly has the Dhamma, and the people are the ones doing the wanting, and the people wanted. Arada would be counted as 1 word, and An-Nas would be the second word, a little like Dhahaba Zaydun. So total number of words so far are 2. And then An is the third one. Yasjudu would be 4 and 5. So Yasjudu means to prostrate, but then they are prostrating. So when we translate, we don't say, and the people intended to they prostrate to the idols. So in the English translation, we just say the people wanted to prostrate to the idols, and that they, that's carried within the Yasjudu verb, is ignored in the translation. We don't try to incorporate the wow into the translation, but conceptually we need to give it a count because it's important. As far as the parsing is concerned, it has implications. Okay, so arad and nas 1, 2, an is the third word, yasjudu would be 4 and 5, and the fourth word would be yasjud, the verb, and the wow would be the fa'il. The wow would be the fa'il, and we saw examples of this in our first episode as well. So we're at 5, and then lil asnami would be 6 and 7. So the prostrating is happening to the idols. So we're at 7. And then we have li annahu, 8, 9, 10. And then yomu would be word number 11. And eidin would be the 12th word. So we have 12 words. So step number 1 is to count the number of words, paying particular attention to the verbs that occur within the sentence. That when the verbs are followed by nouns that are in rafa and clearly have a dhamma, and the subject of the verb is following it in the form of a noun, then the verb will be counted as 1. Otherwise, the verb should be counted as 2. And sometimes the second word would be attached to it, like yasjudu, and sometimes it would just be understood, like in Zaydun dhahaba. There's nothing there on dhahaba that you could point at and say that's the fa'il. So the fa'il within dhahaba in Zaydun dhahaba is actually inferred. Okay, because of the rule. It's inferred. We know because of the rule. Okay, so we got 12 words here. So step number 2 is to know the smaller number that the larger number needs to fit into. Okay, so how do you determine that? How do you figure out step number 2? So figuring out step number 2 is a function of knowing the kind of sentence you're dealing with. And there's 4 kinds of sentences that if you know them well, then they account for 99% of the sentences that you are likely to encounter. The first would be a jumla ismiya, a basic nominal sentence. Regardless of the length of the sentence will always divide into 2 major parts. So if it's 10 words, then those 10 words have to somehow distribute, and some of them need to become the mubtada, and some of them need to become the khabar. And every nominal sentence divides into a mubtada and a khabar. Okay, so you have to figure out what kind of sentence you're dealing with, and then that's how you would know the smaller number that the larger number needs to fit into. In a kana sentence, that number is always 3. It would be the kana itself, followed by the ism of kana, followed by the khabar of kana. And we saw examples of this in our first video, in the first episode, when I introduced the formula for the first time. So we had the sentence, وَكَانَ اسْمُ هَذَا الرَّجُلِ أَزَرَ, and this man's name was Azar. So that sentence was 5 words, and from those 5 words, kana was on its own, and then the next 3 words were the ism of kana, and Azar on its own was the khabar of kana. Okay, so kana sentences always divide into 3 major parts. Sometimes the words are also 3. And if the words are also 3, then you're sort of done because every word is accounted for and there's no further step. So it would be like a simple sentence like Kana al-kitabu jadidan, the book was new. So over here, the total numbers are 3, the major portions are also 3. So you just have to label them correctly and say Kana, ism of Kana, khabar of Kana, and you're done. The challenge is when the sentence is longer. So when you have 5 words total, and those 5 words need to distribute. Okay, so in a kana sentence, the number is always 3. In an inna sentence, the smaller number is also 3, always 3. You'd have the inna itself, and then you'd have the ism of inna and the khabar of inna. And regardless of the amount of words you're starting off with, they would need to distribute into those 3 parts. And from those 3 parts, one of them would be inna on itself. So it's really just the other 2 that you're juggling with. So there's 9 words, there's 10 total, the inna, and then those 9 need to somehow divide into some of them becoming the ism of inna, and some of them becoming the khabar of inna. And we're going to see examples of this. The whole book is examples of this, basically, right? If you're dealing with a verbal sentence, other than kana, because kana is also a verb technically, but we're talking about a verb like sitting and standing and eating and drinking and hitting and helping. So one of those verbs, like over here, the first word in the sentence is arada. Arada means to want and to wish. So this is a normal verb. So in the case of normal verbs like sitting and standing and eating and drinking and hitting and helping, the amount of major portions the sentence will ultimately divide into is not set in stone. Like the bare minimum is 2, because every fi'l must have a fa'il, so you can have 2. And then depending on the meaning of the verb, you may or may not expect there to be a 3rd major portion, which we call a direct object. In Arabic, it's called a maf'ul bihi. So fi'l, fa'il, and maf'ul bihi. And sometimes, instead of a maf'ul bihi, you have the detail of the verb introduced via a preposition. So when there's a preposition involved, we don't call it a direct object, we call it a muta'alliq. So fi'l, fa'il, muta'alliq. And then there could be more than one muta'alliq. There could be more than one prepositional phrase. So, and then there could be the answer to the question when, and where, and how, and other details that the speaker may choose to disclose. So it all depends on how many details the speaker is choosing to disclose. The sentence can become very long. So in verbal sentences, we don't really know. So these 12 words are a verbal sentence. So just by looking at the sentence, you know there's going to be at least 3 major portions. So we're going to have our fi'l, our fa'il, and our maf'ul bihi. 3. Okay, now after yasjudu, there's lil asnami, and after lil asnami, there's li'annahu yawmu eidin. Okay, so what's the smaller number that the larger number needs to fit into? Okay, so we already have our larger number, which is 12. So now we have to know the smaller number that the larger number needs to fit into. So you have to give me a number. What is it? Pause the video, think about it. If you said 5, then that would be too many. If you said 5, then that would be too many. If you said 4, then that's actually correct. Okay, an argument could be made for 3. You could say a fi'l, a fa'il, and a maf'ul bihi. So arada is the fi'l, and nas is the fa'il, and then an until the very end is the 3rd major portion, which would be the direct object. So this is the thing they're wanting. This is the thing they're wanting. They're wanting to prostrate to the idols because it's the day of Eid. But if you really think about it, the prostrating is happening to the idols. So to the idols is part of the thing they're wanting. But the prostrating is not because it's the day of Eid. The desire to prostrate is because it's the day of Eid. Think about that. The desire, and arada suggesting the desire, the wanting. So the people wanted to prostrate to the idols because it was the day of Eid. So if ever you're confused about whether a particular preposition is connecting to a closer verb or is it connecting to the more distant verb, then what you do is you isolate it. They wanted to do this because it was the day of Eid. Prostrating because it was the day of Eid. So which one sounds more correct? Think about it. So I would say, with a high degree of confidence, that the 12 words are dividing into 4 major portions, not 3, 4 major portions, and they would distribute as follows. You'd have arada on its own, and we'd call that the fi'l. Okay, so step number 1 is count the number of words. Step number 2 is know the smaller number that the larger number needs to fit into. So over here, that smaller number is 4. Okay? Step number 3 is to proceed to distribute them and assign them. Assign them paying attention to the phrase level relationships. Because if there's 3 or 4 words together connecting and forming an object, or 6 or 7, 8 words together connecting and forming a mubtada, then those 8 words are not a grocery list. Obviously, within those 8 words, there's relationships. There's like mudaf ilayh going on, or there's mawsuf sifa going on, or there's a prepositional phrase which has its own parts, and these are all taught in the books of grammar. So phrase level relationships are 16 maximum, and there's 6 or 7 that are very common, that are worth knowing. So what we do is in the first 3 weeks of class, in the introductory theory, we give the students 2 of them. And incidentally, the introductory theory, I've put it together and I've made it available for free. So if you haven't already watched it, look in the description, follow the link, and you can opt in for it. It's 4 videos that collectively are about 3 hours of training. And if you go through them over the course of a few days, then you will have a very strong foundation and you will understand how the language works. And then this parsing would be helpful for you, what we're doing here, because all of this presupposes that there's some grammar. And then there's elements that were not taught in the introductory theory. So I'm going to give you a couple of those elements now. Okay, that was not taught in the introductory theory. But if you have exposure from before, or if you watched the workshop, then continue paying attention. Inshallah, we will complete this sentence. Okay. So step number 2 is to simply know the number, the smaller number. And then in the third step, what we do is we proceed to assign them. So the assigning would be like this. 1, 1. Okay, so arada is the first box, the first major portion. An-nas is the second major portion. And then an yasjudu lil asnami, all of those words together, which are 5 words, would be, so 1, 1, 5, and then 5. So 1, 1, 5, 5. So the 12 words divide into 1, 1, 5, 5, and then you label them. So the first box would be fi'l, the arada would be fi'l, an-nas would be the fa'il, and the third one would be maf'ul bihi, and an yasjudu lil asnami, all of that together is the maf'ul bihi. And then li'annahu yawm Eid would be muta'alliq, because that's what a prepositional phrase is called. It's called the muta'alliq. It's just a term, but grammar vocabulary, you got to learn it sooner or later. So muta'alliq. Okay, so now there's another muta'alliq lil asnam, but we're not focusing on that yet, okay, because we're going in layers. So at the top layer, lil asnam is swallowed up within the object, within the maf'ul bihi, so it would be incorrect to say that the sentence divides into 5 parts and say an yasjudu is the third one and lil asnam is the fourth one and annahu yawm Eid is the fifth one. That would be a mistake. That would be a mistake. Okay, so it's 1, 1, 5, and 5. Okay, so now moving forward, so we got our 1, 1. Okay, so the third major portion, which in this case is the maf'ul bihi, is initiated with the an. And over there on the prepositional phrase, we have a preposition and we have a anna. So in this video, let me tell you the feature and function of an and the feature and function of anna. So if you remove the an and say yasjuduna lil asnami, and the verb would have a noon. Okay, yasjuduna, yasjudu, yasjudana, yasjuduna. And an, what it does is it causes a grammar change within the mudari verb, which is a little beyond scope of what we're doing right now, so I'm going to ignore it. If you want to ask a question about it, you can ask in the comments and I'll give you a brief reply to it. But the bottom line is that in the absence of the an, yasjuduna lil asnam would have been a full sentence. And the translation would be, they are prostrating to the idols. So the they is just completely removed from the English translation because it's a requirement of the Arabic that doesn't carry forward to the English. So, but it's there. The waw there does mean they. It's because there's a nas at the front, so that's why the they gets ignored. But the point is that this is a full sentence. Now, maf'ul bihi. direct object, is one of the 22 possible ways an ism could be used. Because an ism could be the first half of a nominal sentence. We call that mubtada. An ism could be the second half of a nominal sentence. We call that khabar. And if there's a kana, then it will be the ism of kana, the khabar of kana. An ism could occur within the sentence as the doer of the verb, the fa'il. An ism could occur as the object of a verb. An ism could come after a preposition. An ism, like lil asnami, over there the al asnami word is an ism and it's coming after the li preposition. An ism could be the second half of a possessive phrase, like kitabu zaydin. So over there the word zayd is the second half of the phrase, kitabu zaydin, which means Zayd's book. So an ism could be used in many, many ways in the Arabic language, and the total number of ways an ism could be used is 22. Now these 22 places are there for isms to occupy. But apart from an ism, could a phrase conceivably become mubtada? Can a phrase conceivably become the khabar? Can two or more words together connect and form the fa'il? Can two or more words connect and form the maf'ul bihi? Obviously yes, and that's why we're doing this, because it's quite common. That is rare to have a maf'ul bihi that's just one word. Like, I mean, it can happen, but in this case it's 5 words together forming the maf'ul bihi. So phrases can obviously fill the slots that a single ism could fill. And what is a phrase? A phrase is 2 or more words that are connected together in some sort of relationship that's not a full sentence, and it functions as a single unit. So it's like the tall boy. So you say Ismail alayhi salam was a tall boy. Kana Ismailu waladan saghiran. So it's like the tall boy arrived, I saw the tall boy, I passed by the tall boy. So it's not just boy, it's tall boy, and the two words together are functioning as a single unit. So phrases can obviously occupy the 22 places. Now, can a full sentence occupy the 22 places? Can it? In the case of some of them it can, like a predicate. If you have a mubtada, and instead of a one word khabar, you have a full sentence that's the predicate of the mubtada, then this is fine. Okay, like Zaydun dhahaba's example, the very simple example, the translation is Zayd kama, he went. So dhahaba is not just one word. Dhahaba has a huwa, and those two words together are connecting and forming the predicate. So here we have an example of a mubtada and a full sentence occurring as a predicate. And in the example we gave in the first episode, وَكَانَ آزَرُ يَبِيعُ الْأَصْنَامِ, and Azar would sell idols. So over there, Azar was the ism of kana, and يَبِيعُ الْأَصْنَامِ was actually a full sentence. If you put your thumb on the kana Azar and just read يَبِيعُ الْأَصْنَامِ on its own, then it has all of the components that a full sentence would have. There's a fi'l there, there's a fa'il there, which is the pronoun. Don't forget the pronoun. The verb is carrying a pronoun. And al-asnam would be the maf'ul bihi. And those three together are a full sentence. So a full sentence occurring and becoming the predicate for kana. So this can happen in the case of a few of them, from the 22 possible ways an ism could be used. And if you want to know what those 22 places are, those 22 possible ways, this is half of grammar. And what we do is that we teach 15 of them before starting the book, and the rest of them we introduce them based on need and necessity. All of the 22 places would probably be exhausted by about week 9 or week 12. And then we'd have a presentation and we'd like gather them all together in a single video so the students have a frame of reference, and we'll give them a chart and a sheet, and they know them. They don't just know them, they know them intimately. So if you want to know 15 of the 22 places, you can visit the workshop, and video 4 within the workshop is specifically about this, developing the total possible ways that ism could be used with definitions and with examples, and in a way that when you go through that, when you listen to the presentation, then you know them, and you know them well. And this is the presentation that the sister talked about, who took the workshop many years ago, and she sent an email to the help desk, and she said that, I've been studying Arabic for 10 years. In parentheses, she said, yes, 10, and this is my 11th, and I always thought it was too slow. And I kept giving up. I always thought that you have to sit with long list of vocabulary and you have to know for every singular the plural and every plural the singular. And it was so boring and it was so tedious, and I kept giving up. But subhanAllah, I had hope in Allah that there was a faster, not faster but easier way. So I kept trying again. And then she said, subhanAllah, all the things I studied, he covered in a single hour, and it was not tedious. And it all made sense. And you can't imagine the amount of money I've spent on studying Arabic. I wish I hadn't, because then I would be able to pay for this course. So that's the power of this method. So getting back to what we're doing here. So I was talking about the 22 possible ways an ism can be used, that those 22 positionings, or those 22 possible ways an ism could be used, I call it the 22 places, they're primarily for the ism. They were invented by the grammarians to account for the ways an ism could be used. But they're not restricted to just isms. Like phrases can obviously occupy all of those slots. Not a problem. Now, can sentences occupy those slots? In some cases, yes. And I give you an example. A predicate, a full sentence can become a predicate. And this is true for a basic nominal sentence predicate, and it's also true for a kana predicate. And the example for the kana predicate is kana azaru yabi'u al-asnam, and Azar would sell idols. Okay, now subject and object, subject as in fa'il, and maf'ul bihi, and following a preposition. These are slots within the 22 places that a full sentence cannot occupy. A full sentence is too large. A full sentence cannot become a fa'il. A full sentence cannot become a maf'ul bihi. A full sentence cannot follow a preposition. So the full sentence would need to be converted, and it would need to be turned and reduced and watered down into something more manageable. So in the case of the verbal sentence, what you do is you would strip away the tense from the verb. And if you take a verb and you strip away the tense, what are you left with? Think about it. Pause the video, think about it. If you take a verb and remove the tense from the verb, what are you left with? If you said masdar, that's correct. If you said masdar, masdar is the verbal noun, like the skiing and skating. Or I like typing. I like skiing. I love walking on the treadmill. I love lifting weights. So those are all words that end in ing. They're not verbs because they don't have tense. So prostrating to the idols. So the people wanted prostrating to the idols. Or you say to prostrate to the idols. So it's called an infinitive, or it doesn't matter what it's called in English. Bottom line is it's the action minus the tense. So what an does in the Arabic language is it enters on the verbal sentence. 99% of the time that would be a mudari verb, a present tense verb like here. And it would strip the tense and it would take this verbal sentence and water it down, which would then allow you to use it in one of the 22 slots that are primarily there for isms and phrases, because a full sentence is too large, so it needs to be converted. So an converts the verbal sentence into a masdar, into the meaning of a masdar, and it's called masdariya. The an's called masdariya. And then anna does the same thing to the nominal sentence that an does to the verbal sentence, because over here it says because it was the day of Eid. So if you take away the because, it is the day of Eid. It was the day of Eid. That's a full sentence. It was the day of Eid. But then being the day of Eid is being presented as a reason for their wanting to prostrate. So you see, so anna, it took the it is, because the who means it is the day of Eid, and it turned it into a fact. It watered it down and it reduced it into the fact. So that's the primary takeaway from this video, is that you just learned that there's 22 possible ways an ism could be used, and those 22 phrases can easily occupy them with no hindrance, with no obstacle whatsoever. Full sentences, a little tricky. In some cases, full sentences can serve as predicates and serve as places within the 22 possible ways an ism can be used. But in other occasions, a sentence would be too large and it would need to be converted, and the conversion happens primarily through two of them, and they're both coming in the same sentence. So this is why this book is so good. It's a simple book, but it's so profound, okay, if you look at it, because the author gradually brings these structures, and these are functional words that occur within the Quran hundreds and hundreds of times. So if you grab a vocabulary list, the 50% most frequently used words in the Quran, and they tell you an, they tell you anna, but they're not going to tell you what I just told you right now. They're not going to tell you the feature and function of an and the feature and function of anna. So with that out of the way, we can now proceed with the rest of the parsing. So we have our maf'ul bihi, which is 5 words. It divides into an masdariya and a converted structure. So the an masdariya is will be put to the side, and yasjudu lil asnami, it's all of that collectively. We have a name for it. We're going to call it a converted structure. Now it has a more boring grammar designation, which I could tell you, okay, but I think it would just overwhelm you. So I'm going to suppress that, and we're just going to call it a converted structure, a CS. So we have an masdariya and converted structure, and the converted structure then further divides into a fi'l, a fa'il, and a muta'alliq. The fi'l is yasjud, the fa'il is the waw, and the muta'alliq is lil asnam, and then we change the color of the marker, and lil asnami would divide into jar majroor, and jar majroor is standard for every prepositional phrase. It always divides into jar and majroor. Jar means preposition, and majroor means object of the preposition. Okay, so that's the third box out of the way. لِأَنَّهُ يَوْمُ عِيد would be the fourth box. It's called muta'alliq. It further divides into jar majroor. So it starts off the same. Li is the jar, everything else is the majroor. And then the majroor would divide into an anna, an ism of anna and a khabar of anna. So at this stage right now, you can just call it anna. You don't have to call it with the technical term that's reserved for this particular harf in the books of grammar, because it's a complicated name and I mean, you can learn that at some other, because everything we do here within the stories of the Prophet's book in the first 6 months of the course, we then revisit it all through a grammar text which is 132 pages, and it's called the Hidayat al-Nahu book, and it's the best book in the world for grammar. I mean, you can challenge it. Like, if you disagree with me, we can have a conversation on that. But I've taught the book 42 times. 42 times. And I consider it the best book in the world for grammar. So everything we're studying here in the first 6 months, based on 80-20 focus and based on need and necessity, it's being revisited again in much greater detail when that book is done. And that's when the students begins reading without vowels, because the book is unvoweled. So this is how proficiency is attained. Okay, so we have our final major portion here, the fourth one, which is muta'alliq, further dividing into jar majroor. The majroor divides into an anna, an ism of anna, which is just a who, and a khabar of anna, which is yawm mu'eed, and then yawm mu'eed would further divide into mudaf ilayh, and you're done. So step number 1 is count the number of words. Step number 2 is to know the smaller number that the larger number needs to fit into. And the third step is to proceed to distribute them properly based on phrase level relationships. Step number 4, repeat steps 2 and 3 until every word is in its own box. Repeat step 2 and 3, in other words, change the color of the marker. Okay, so to make this more concrete, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now flash the diagram of the completed sentence. Now within the diagram, there's a couple of errors, okay, because I didn't do this myself. It was done like several years ago. A student put it together and shared it on the forum, and we just saved it there for students. So basically, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I believe she did it fi'l fa'il maf'ul bihi. And then within the maf'ul bihi, she said, an masdariya, converted structure, that's fine. And then converted structure, she said, fi'l fa'il to muta'alliq. So lil asnam was the muta'alliq to yashjudu, and li'annahu yawm mu'eed was like the second prepositional phrase connecting to yashjudu, and she considered it within the confines of the maf'ul bihi. And I told you earlier that when you really test the meaning, that doesn't seem correct. The better way to do it is 4 major portions, where لِأَنَّهُ يَوْمُ عِيدٍ is not related to yashjudu, but لِأَنَّهُ يَوْمُ عِيدٍ is actually related to the arad at the front. So we are now done with this presentation, and at this stage right now, you might want to visit the complete playlist and come back to it. And I'm going to try to fill the playlist with at least 10 episodes. 10 episodes, and I might go on beyond 10, who knows? Okay, like if I get engagement and if I get likes and shares and people are commenting and they say they want this, then we can go beyond 10. One thing is for sure, that this is the heart of the Arabic language. I don't care. This is the heart of the Arabic language. Nothing else is as important as this is. Now the sentences we're doing right now are rather simple, and you might think that, oh, I could have translated that without knowing the grammar. Sure. But how about if you double the length of the sentence and you start introducing nested structures? And you start introducing prepositional phrases where there's no verb in the vicinity, then would you be able to do it? Would you be able to translate it properly? Or would you start making gross errors? And would you start mistranslating? Like the example I gave in the video where we talked about the 2 kinds of prepositions. There's a preposition that exists alongside verbs as a quote-unquote matter of vocabulary, and there's other prepositions that are discussed in the books of grammar, and if you confuse them, then it results in a mistranslation. So there was an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was highlighting the miraculous eloquence of the Quran, and it said that Allah testifies to your messengerhood by way of that book which He's revealed to you. And how has He revealed it? He's revealed it through His most perfect knowledge. In other words, He's embedded within the Quran elements. He's engineered into the Quran elements that make it miraculous. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the necessary being on whom the universe depends. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls the level of eloquence that human beings can reach. And this book reaches levels of eloquence that a human being cannot reach. And that's why the ancient Arabians were challenged to produce the equivalent of 3 small verses that could meet and match up with the Quran in its eloquence, and they chose to go to war. And they would not have done that unless they recognized the miraculous eloquence of the Quran. So there's a lesson in there with respect to the grammar, okay, with the B there, bima. So that B, most translators, if you go look in Quran.com and look at the English translations, they will not have done it the way I've done it. So if you want more on this, I'll flash the video here, the one about the 2 prepositions. Watch that video. It's only 10 minutes long. It's mind-blowing and it's profound. It's one of my better videos. And with that said, I look forward to speaking with you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.